You are listening to the Game Like Training podcast, where we talk about golf practice, golf learning, golf psychology, the golf swing, PGA Tour, college golf, and all things golf. On this show, we're talking about some of the most common things going on in the golfing world. We share our beliefs and insights on the golf industry, which has really come from being in this industry for over a decade. We try to bring on as many top quality coaches, world-renowned academics, and pioneering professors from different domains that can really help the industry and help coaches coach better or players play better. Hi, I'm one of your hosts, Eric Zeigel.
And I'm your co-host, Iain Highfield. And to get started, I just want to say we love golf and we love helping people. And it's that combined that has driven us to create this podcast. There's so much good coaching information out there. We genuinely believe it's our responsibility to share that information with as many people as we can. So, on today's show, our guest, I actually discovered his name as I was trawling through one of Nick Shertock's many Facebook forums. And when Nick Shertock posts, we tend to listen. He's a smart guy with a great insight into the industry. And as soon as I saw he'd posted something about a coach who was specializing in an area that wasn't biomechanics or golf swing, I picked up the phone, I called him, and we had a great chat literally the next day. And I said, we have to get this guy on the podcast. So today we're speaking to Danny Adams from Daniel Adams Golf or Danny Adams Golf? Which one?
Danny Adams Golf.
Danny Adams Golf. There we go. Welcome to the show, Danny. How are you?
All good, all good. How about yourselves?
Yeah, good. Really appreciate you being on. I think the best thing that we can do, as we do with most guests, just tell us a little bit about your journey into golf, and then how you came to have some of your work that I saw posted on the Facebook forums by Nick.
Okay, perfect. Like most golfers, I got in through family. My dad got me into the game, started playing golf, funny enough, on the beach with an old cut-down wooden club, a lot like Sevi. I was fortunate enough to be in like a private club, so start on the beach, which really helped with the creativity of shots and what have you. Worked my way up, got to a low single-figure handicap. Ended up getting lessons through Alan Thompson, who some may or may not know is Tommy Fleetwood's coach. We fast forward another 10 years to turn pro, and I was fortunate enough to actually get a job working under Alan. So I was his assistant for 6-7 years, which really was an eye-opener from coaching. It was such a priceless experience working with, in my opinion, still the best coach I've ever come across. And I got to pick his brains every single day, to the point where I drove him crazy on all things coaching. Got to sit in on sessions with Tommy and Jamie Donaldson and what have you, and pick his brains left, right, and centre. Once I'd finished my PGA, so this is like 10 years ago now, I was actually doing 2 degrees at the same time. I was doing my PGA and my standard and a BA honours degree in golf coaching at University of Central Lancashire. And by some miracle, I got a first class in that. I got a scholarship to do the next level up. And at the time, I was in a position where I could have access to some very knowledgeable coaches, Butch Jarman, Ledbetter, Sean Foley, and Alan. And I asked them all, look, I've got a chance to do a great research project at the highest level. Where do you think I should go? And at the time, this was 10 years ago, they were saying biomechanics. This is the big thing. At the time, I didn't have a Scooby-Doo what biomechanics was. So I sat down with the professors and I said, right, I want to do a biomechanics, a doctorate in biomechanics. And they asked me, what do you know? And I said, well, I don't know. This is where I learn. And they were like, well, you don't come in a level 8 degree, the highest in the world, when you don't really know much about the area. So then I basically said, look, hands up. I've got a chance to do this great research program. Where do you guys reckon I go? And they flipped it back to me and said, well, what do you want to do? And like most coaches, they said, well, I want to be the best coach I can possibly be. And he said, well, why don't you start with just defining that? What is a good coach versus a bad coach? An expert coach versus a novice coach? Because if you can identify a more expert coach versus a novice coach, you can then more accurately identify the tools and the unique differences between them. So then that led me down the path of trying to identify, okay, what is a better coach? What is better coaching practice versus poorer coaching practice? And like most people, I would use results, experience coaching, qualifications, more knowledge. Well, then through time, we were able to debunk those criterias and say they themselves are not indicators of, or they are criteria of coaching expertise. And it got to the point where I was thinking, well, coaching is, it's a decision-making process. As a coach, you have to make decisions, and better coaches, they make better decisions. Well, maybe that's it. Maybe making better decisions is the key to better coaching and to get better results, and maybe to get better players and better facilities and coaching over a longer period of time and getting awards, all the fancy, sparkly things that are very attractive to us at first. They might be the after effect of better decision making. Now, I researched publications or any published work specifically on how coaches form their decisions, and there wasn't. But yet, in the literature world, there is a huge amount of it. Okay. So nobody had looked at this decision-making processes through a golf coaching lens, and that gave me the platform actually to complete the doctorate, and that's where we are today, really.
Awesome. So, when you talk decision making, are we talking? So, for example, myself, I was in England. I'd set up a business. I was moving in the right direction, and then I decided to come to the USA. Are we talking about that form of decision making, or are we talking about this player is in front of me and they are struggling to shoot a score that they want to shoot? We take them on the golf course, we look at their stats, we get them physically screened, and then we decide, okay, how are we going to help this person improve? Is it both, or is it...
Maybe actually a bit of both, but definitely more of a second option versus the first. But the principles that we may talk about here, you could actually relate them and see how they'd fit for the first option you just gave there.
Okay, awesome. So can you give us a little bit more, I guess, listening into what you've just said, we could almost assume that some of the criteria that we have in our minds of what makes a good coach, based on what you've said, it potentially isn't true. That's more the byproduct. So what are the myths that surround this? If we said now we had to bust a few myths for the listeners on what a good coach is, what would you say they are?
From my identity. So first of all, you'd say better coaches work with better players. Quite simply, who do they work with? And that was a common thing, even as a golfer myself, is I'll go and see Alan Thompson because he works with Tommy Fleetwood, so he must be a good coach. Well, yes, maybe at working at that level, but does that mean you can't be an expert coach working at beginner level golfers, or with beginner level golfers, or junior golfers? Because working with those type of clients, you're working to completely different goals. You're presenting it in a completely different way. And when you look at it from an education perspective, just because you are a teacher at university level, it doesn't mean you will also be equally as effective or equally as an expert at primary or elementary level, because you're working with complete different animals. So, like I say, one common criteria is, oh, he's a great coach. Butch Harmon's a great coach because he works with yada, yada, yada. Well, yes, because he's working in a particular way with these type of animals. How about further down the performance line?
So you're looking at more what got Butch there, as opposed to Butch must be good because he's there.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So can we dive into that a little bit?
So I think first of all, when we look at decision making, there are really, from the literature perspective, there'll be two avenues to look at. First of all, it's how you form your decisions, and then secondly, what your decisions are on. And I think the how is equally as important as what you're making your decision on. So at the moment, there's a lot of information out there, declarated knowledge bases on biomechanics and psychology and what have you, and that might help you decide what you're going to decide to work on. But how you make your decisions would be equally as important. So there are two theoretically accepted forms of decision making. We have on one side called classical decision making, and the other naturalistic. So classical decision making is a very slow down, systematic, analytical way of thinking. It has significantly less pressure on you, significantly less time for you to form your decisions. And that allows you to come up with multiple potential solutions. So you might have a golfer in front of you, and let's say you're away from the golf at the moment, and you're just thinking of, in a very slow down way, well, I could do this with this player, and then I could do this, and then I could do this, or I could take this option and go here. It allows you to make multiple potential options or multiple potential avenues you can take the player, but then the chains and decisions. So what are the steps? So step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So the chains of decisions can be interlinked. The flip side would be naturalistic decision making, which is very much on the spot, under pressure. You don't have that time to compare and contrast multiple options. It's in the heat of the moment. You might even make your decisions through pressure and emotions felt during the coaching dynamics. Now, both have their positives and downsides. So when you hear that yourself, what springs to mind? If you had an option of how you'd form your decisions, is there anything that you guys think? Okay, well, this would be the benefits here in one side.
Yeah, I mean, I can say personally, I would probably fall more under the classical decision making. I like to collect data, and we do with the work that Iain and myself have done with Stuart Morgan. He has I don't know if this is his or if he took this from somebody else, but he calls it the critical pathway, and understanding where players want to get to. So kind of like a goal setting session, but understanding where players want to get to, and being able to map out kind of where they need to be at certain phases to get to that kind of end goal. And I use a lot of I use it as an opportunity to understand where the player is coming from, kind of to test their knowledge. Do they know, if they're a junior golfer, do they know, the scores and the things they need to be doing to be playing in that AJGA level? And then do they know what they need to do to be playing at that Division I level if that's their goal? So using some stats, comparing where they currently are, and then kind of building the plan from there. But I have read your PDF, so I do understand where there is kind of that naturalistic approach. When you have the student in front of you, it's not necessarily reactionary, but that's where you are kind of having to make those decisions a little bit quicker. So I can see times where when I was first starting to coach, where I definitely was more in that naturalistic decision making. That was more my tendency. It was, this player's hitting a slice today, let's just abort. Like fix it. But I definitely have been there. I've definitely been in that naturalistic. I can say that as I've progressed, and the more coaches I've been around, better coaches, the more I've kind of gone towards that classical decision making. I like long-term plans. I like doing programs with my golfers at whatever level.
I would say I'm similar to Eric in that respect. I would always put the student at the center of what I'm doing. So the reason I'm trying to get as much knowledge and education and experience as I possibly can is, I guess, so I can see more pathways and more opportunities to help this student develop towards their goals, but in line with their needs. I think the more pathways and more options you've got, the more fluid you can be within a framework. I have never really been one to under pressure just make a change. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If I stick to the end goal with maybe too much
focus, it's a balance, and this is the art, isn't it? This is the art of coaching. It's finding that balance between sticking to the long-term gains, not throwing too many quick fixes in, But is the player bought into the system of, right, we're playing for the long term card here? If that player is shanking it and you're continually working for the long term gain, how do we get that message across to the player? And just like that, how do we not convince the player, but how do we keep them on board for the plan? And it's these conversations now that I feel that need to be had with coaches, particularly, I want to say younger, but trainee coaches. At the moment, so like you say, back in the day, I used to make on-the-spot decisions, but now it's a bit more classical, and it's controlling the golfer's focus point. That in itself is a skill, and I think we as coaches should be trained in being able to control a person's focus point.
Yeah, and I think the challenge too with that is it comes down a lot of times to the student's motivation, right? And it's
And even personality differences. Sometimes you get a real strong character you're coaching, and you struggle to get a word in edgeways because they're so, forceful in the point of in the direction of the lesson. It's how do you as a coach, right? How do I control this now? How do I stop the player controlling the lesson, and how do I take ownership of it? That in itself is a skill, and through my research, it's something that I feel coaches aren't trained to do. They're almost left at will to learn these skills, and I think that's quite a damaging thing because it's quite important.
Yeah, no,
Communicate effectively what you intend. You as a coach, what you'd like the player to do, but if that player redirects the session into a different approach, so you could be saying, I want you to focus on your right elbow position. Let's say you want the player to focus on that. 3 shots later, they're shanking it, and the player goes, let me just work on my weight transfer. And you're thinking, hang on, that's not that's the focus point. It might be relevant, but it's not the focus point that I want you to have. It's how do you as a coach get control and redirect the session back to your focus points as the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it's these skills and tools that I believe coaches, particularly at an education level, are not really being taught how to do effectively enough, because they themselves are a skill. It's not enough just to say, oh yeah, you should have good communication skills. Okay, but how do I get it? And how do I train it?
yeah. No, I completely agree. I know when I did my PGA stuff, I don't remember anything being on decision making.
Yeah. And that's how ironic is that. Coaching is a decision-making process, but yet we don't actually look at any of the literature, any of the background, any different types of decision-making. That itself is quite eye-opening. And then on relation to classical and naturalistic decision-making, particularly over here in the UK PGA, the final exam for your golf coaching, and I think you might back us up here, is you have to give a coaching session. And you meet a person you've never met before. I think you have 10, 15 minutes to gather a little bit of information, and then you've got to give a half-hour lesson. You've got to identify the performance area, and you've actually got to see an improvement. So that in itself, the education is encouraging coaches to make decisions quickly, so more naturalistic, on the spot, under pressure, and actually get a quick result.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
My knowledge of the PGA comes from Matthew, and I was one of Matthew's first ever students. I was playing off 3-4 handicap, and Matthew was teaching me, and he taught me for free when he had his PGA, because I believe there's like maybe 10 different shots that you could potentially have to demo in a lesson, and he was just giving me the spiel of, okay, you're gonna open your shoulders, you open the face, and you this and you this. So I saw what Matthew went through. Now, my background, when I came out of university, I went into the business world, sales and sales training. And actually, what I was taught, I was sent on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming courses, which is debatable, the overall validity of NLP. NLP is really repackaging certain types of research and communication and understanding of humans and putting sparkly bells and whatever else, or just making it more modern, right? So, but it did help me become a more effective communicator. And then every day in my professional work, when I was giving either seminars or when I was doing sales calls or sales training, whatever it was that I was doing, we were taught about communication skills, verbal, non-verbal. So I've come from a very different world. And I think it's a very interesting point that you've said about the PGA, because it's not only the PGA that sets you up for that form of decision making, it's actually the structure of the golf industry. If myself, Eric, and Matthew, we put people on monthly programs, and they can come, and at some times there'll be all three of us at the lesson, and we'll be with this one individual, and we'll all be talking about what pathway do we want to take this individual on, and we know we're going to have them for at least 6 more months. Retention for what we're doing is very high. Now, if it was me on my own in a 1-hour lesson, and a guy comes in and says to me, hey, I want the club not across the line, or hey, today when we do mental training, I don't want to do mental training, I want to go into the gym. And I'm like, well, no, we need to do... If my hourly money relies on that, I'm probably going to give him what he wants so I can pay my car payment and my mortgage. So there's so much that goes into this decision making, and it really keeps coming back to this, the quick fix and the hour lessons. You know, which came first? This kind of decision making that fueled the industry, or did the industry build itself this way, and then we were responsive to it?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think it's we as coaches, if we can start the trend of professionalizing and implementing more of a longer term agenda, very much like the fitness industry. I guess back in the day it was very quick fix, just lift weights, and then all of a sudden you looked at nutrition and lifestyle, and ultimately it becomes a lifestyle change. When you start working with, say, a personal trainer, you know you're in it for at least 6 weeks, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2-3 years. Particularly those who are after significant results. Those who are training, they're going into the gym now, and as they're training, they're thinking about where they're going to be in 6 months' time, in a year's time, maybe when they're performing, or if it's a bodybuilder when they set on the stage. Where am I going to be in a year's time? So it's this longer term thinking is implemented earlier on. Versus the majority of coaches, from my research, for example, we in my first study, we wanted to get a big picture overview of what the decision-making trend was like with golf coaches. One of the questions was, when you first work with a player and you've never met them before, on average, how quickly do you decide what to work on and in what way? And we gave them multiple options, all the way from 10 minutes, 0 to 10 minutes, up until 3 days plus. And off the top of my head, from club level coaching, 80 to 90% of the coaches said within 10 minutes. Yeah. Now, that might be because they've only got a half-hour lesson, because the player in front of them can only afford a half-hour lesson. So they can't take 3 days if they've only got half an hour. Yeah. But maybe it's the fact that they're just offering half-hour sessions and not, like you say, having a different, what we call issue conceptualization process, saying to the client, look, I need to see you 3 or 4 times first. I want to see you on the golf course. I want to take some biomechanical data, some TrackMan data. I want to speak to you, take data from multiple avenues. Then you can come back behind the scenes, classically decide your form of action, your plan of action. I want to take this step and this step and this step, and almost like a game of chess. I'm going to move here, then I'm going to move there, then I'm going to move here. Yeah. And how am I going to take you from where you are now to where you need to be in 6 months' time, a year's time, not in 6 days' time, because it's just unrealistic. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the big challenge of, everybody's kind of after that instant gratification. They want,
absolutely, yeah, and it's so much more attractive. Why would I want to work with you guys for 6 months when the guy down the road says he can get me better than 6 hours in 6 days?
Yeah, and it is.
It's like if it's a quick fix, it is a quick fix. It says what it says on the tin. If you're fixing it quickly, and there's a lot of literature out there to suggest that if you learn a skill quickly, you'll also lose it quickly. If you and we as athletes would like to retain the skill over a longer period of time. So a lot of the work through Dave Collins and Howie Carson, I could try and maybe attach some of the papers and what have you. But there's a great analogy with regards to swimming. So I think I may have mentioned it to you, Iain, on the call, but it's kind of sends home the message of how skill retention, which is what we would all like. So whatever skill we're going to learn, we want to keep hold of it. We don't want to lose it the next day or in a week's time. It's very relatable to the time frame it takes you to learn the skill. So, for example, a bunch of school kids were learning to swim. There were 7 schools, and he said, school 1, you come one day, school 2, you come the next, school 3. So you're all going to come one day a week for 7 weeks. After 7 weeks, the school kids had improved, but not really that much. So he said, well, let's change it up. Why don't we get school 1 to come 7 days in 1 week, and then school 2, 7 days, school 3, 7 days. So the same amount of coaching, but just spread amongst a different amount. At the end of it, each school, the kids' performance had shot up. So they go, well, this is the way. It's the same amount of coaching, but we've condensed it into a shorter period. A year later, they tested the same pool of kids. Those who actually had a higher performance level, their skill retention actually had dropped.
Yeah.
This is those who didn't appear to have improved so much, their skill level retention was higher. So more subtle, longer term progress is more compatible to longer retention levels of skill. This is, I've spiked, my performance has improved a lot in the last week. Well, let's see where it is in a month's time, 2 months' time.
Yeah, and it's hard because, like Iain said, there's a lot of you're gonna get a lot of golfers that come to you that want that quick change. They want that quick fix because I'm playing tomorrow against my buddies. I don't want to look bad, and so that there's a challenge. It's not it's not just the PGA that's kind of setting it. Yeah, it's the golf industry in general.
And I think this is where professionalizing and not just from the coaches understanding the differences in decision making, but actually saying to the players, look, if you as a player want your coach to form the absolute robust, credible decision, allow them to make classical decisions. And like I say, it's almost, and sometimes we might need to be harsher with it and use analogies. If you go to the gym the day before you're going on holiday with a beer gut saying, I want a 6-pack, they're going to go, you should have come a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where I've been going wrong.
Yeah. But it's
coaches. I've got a competition tomorrow. I've got a monster slice. Well, you should have came 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago.
Well, it's funny that it's funny that you bring up the gym analogy because I think most people, with whatever knowledge they have towards nutrition or weightlifting or anything like that, they're gonna understand that it is a process. If I want to get stronger, if I want to lose weight, they understand that it's not going to be this quick thing.
And it's the same in the business world. If your business was struggling and you brought a business coach in to help you, they'd assess all the multiple potential areas from marketing to packaging to customer relations, all, and then say, look, it's going to take you 6 months. And you'd go, yeah, of course. I've almost been toying with the idea of creating a book entitling it "The Rules of the World Don't Apply to Golf."
Yeah.
Golf's different. Golf is different.
So
science, no, it doesn't matter.
So the important question, how do we do this as coaches? How do we start to change this paradigm in the golf industry? How do we move away from, seeing coaches fall into this naturalistic decision-making process? What would be your suggestions?
I would say, like I say, a touch of it is on the education side, but it can only work if we could snap our fingers right now and every golf coach in the world only acted this way, boom, the issue is solved. Because players couldn't, if they approach somebody for the golf lesson, regardless of who it is, it's, yes, sorry, we're going to go through a very comprehensive analysis process now. It's going to be a 6-week analysis process, and then we're going to work together with them for 6 months. Straight away, it would completely change the culture. But if only, I think it's starting off with a smaller select few of coaches, like you guys already seem to be doing a lot of it. But the more coaches we can get involved working in this way, the better. And I think that, for me, would start at the education process, systems, because that's where the training coaches from the get-go. So if the PGA turn out 1,000 coaches next year, but if those 1,000 coaches were majority of the decisions are classical, but also bear in mind it's not just about only making decisions at a classical nature. You do have to, as a coach, make decisions on the spot.
Yes.
Because coaching is dynamic. You can't pre-plan everything, and that's where nested decision making comes in. It's taking the benefits of both. It's the benefits of classical decision making. You know, if you have to stand in front of a judge and say, why did you take that action? What's your rationale for saying, I'm going to work with this player on that particular issue in this particular way, and I'm going to build a coach-athlete relationship in this particular way. So it's all interlinked, it's interchained. You have a good, strong rationale for your steps forward. Then, in theory, all you have to do as a coach is action it. But in the dynamics of a golf lesson, things happen, things change, and it's you will be required as a coach to make decisions on the spot. But if you have this contingency plan and your classical decision making as a roadmap to say, right, this is how we're going to get this player through the woods. We've got to take this direction. So those decisions you make on the spot are interlinked with the classical decision making, and that is what nest decision making is all about.
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think it has to start with, there has to be some awareness. You know, we have to shed a light on the subject of you know, this professional judgment and decision making within the industry, so people understand kind of the difference between, you know, the classical as well as the naturalistic. And then, you know, it's actually funny because it's something that I learned not in the golf industry. It's something I learned in a sales training course I did. But having a upfront contract with the student when they come to you, explaining, and you've said it already, explaining to them, this is what is going to, this, like laying out the plan and, you know, upfront, and saying it's going to be, you know, I want you to commit to 10 lessons, 6 months, whatever it is, but the first session is this. And I know we do that, where the first session I always say, look, this is all data capture. We're going to get all the information we need so that we can then talk and build this plan, and we can let you know where we're going to be going with it. So when you leave today, you're not going to have your little drills and your little training aids. Like, that's not the goal of today's session. And when you're upfront and honest about it and lay that out to them, it allows you as a coach to develop that long-term plan. And then you have the opportunity from there to keep that, or we'll go into what you we're talking about, the nested decision making, where you still have this idea of where you want to go. The student knows where you're trying to go, and then you can still kind of make those the naturalistic decision making, you know, while you're going through that process.
But it also has to go deeper, right? We're talking all about coaches here, and I'm sure there are coaches that do understand this stuff and have tried to get better in this area. But then what happens is, you know, for example, myself and Eric, we've sat down with a parent of a junior golfer, and they've committed to a long-term athletic development program. They pay monthly. They pay a premium price for it. And then the parent turns up and says, hey, I need you to get this swing less flat and less laid off. Yeah, no one can play from there. And I said, I feel like Ricky Fowler did all right when he was first on tour. And no, change. You're gonna change it in this lesson. And I said, we're not. It's not what we agreed. Yeah. We're not changing it. It's not what we agreed. Yeah. And we didn't change it. Yeah. And maybe he's gonna come back. Maybe not. We'll find out next week.
Perfect example there of communication. Now, because you were strong-willed and a strong character, you were able to say, you knew, you had an idea of how to get your message across, as in, no, we're not putting here. Someone who might not be as confident or as strong-minded would crumble and go, oh, yes, I'll change the backswing, even though it might not even be right for the athlete.
You're confidence and strong-minded. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have done that a few years ago.
Even just to communicate. Right, how do I approach this? How do I get my message across here? That is a skill in itself.
Yeah, and you know, I guess again it goes back the other two issues that I do think need addressing in the industry. If that was just me on my own charging X amount, yeah, I get myself, Eric, Matthew. We're in the process of hiring another coach. We have a retail store. We pool all our resources together. Cool. We collaboratively coach, share the money, you know, because we're trying to make a positive change in the industry, but also the environment we've created allows us to do that. If I was on my own with that amount of money on the line, would I have done it? I like to think I would, but and also if it was Tiger, If I was at the Masters with Tiger and Tiger turned to me and said, "Do it," would I have stood up so strong?
Now this is an interesting point. This gets a little later on in the thesis. My third study was looking at actually coaching at tour level, and again, interestingly, for a lot of people, coaching on tour is an attractive thing, and maybe a lot of coaches are coaching purely that's something they'd like to achieve. But from my knowledge, again, there's no training, there's no education in the differences between coaching at a home base, so on a range with a club level golfer, versus coaching on the tour. It would be different. It's Butch Harmon. You're working with a different animal. You're in a different environment. You're working for different goals. And if you as a coach have not been trained and just been made aware of the differences, you are going into an environment that you've never stepped foot on before, and you have to trial and error it. Now, there is a lot of benefit to trial and error, the type of learning, but equally, 50% of you will make some good decisions, 50% of you will make some bad, and how damaging is that for you as a coach and to the players?
It would be very nice if your trial was based on something that you'd been given during the PGA, or if you've had access to your work, you now, okay, at the tour level, this is what potentially could happen. So you're going in there a little more aware.
And this actually comes study 3 for me really arrived from my own experiences as a coach. So I was fortunate enough to be able to shadow Alan and what have you, and be around coaching tour players at a home-based venue. So without our private club, they were coming to us. But I'd never had the experiences of actually coaching at tour, so on the range with a tournament. And it was somewhat a bit of a fluke. I was over in Germany on holiday, and it was the ladies' German Open at the time. And the first person I had experience coaching with or supporting and helping was Charlie Hull. So I'm this is a big, I'm kind of being thrown in here. But at the same time, I was asking myself, wow, this is different, because we can only go to the range at certain times. We have to go on the course at certain times. We have to work around her physio and her diet and when she's teeing off and where have you. I'm trying to get her maybe to focus, or we're together trying to get to focus in one avenue, but there are people, other caddies, other players chirping in and distracting the athlete. So I'm thinking, wow, these are some skills that I need as a coach. How do I control my players' focus here so that we are working on our goals, not the person next to us who might be hitting it a bit straighter and they're working on a training aid. Oh, let's get the training aid over. Let's try it.
Yeah. Well, it's even you can dial it back from that. The first time I went to support a tour player, I thought I had a player pass. So I drive right up to the door of the golf club and they're like, sorry, bro, not today. Eric goes to support a tour player. He has a player pass, but parks in the car park 5 miles away. Didn't know. He's getting on the bus.
Took me 30 minutes to get there.
It doesn't. No one teaches you these things, right?
So
it's a great point.
Imagine that was your time at the event, and your player is expecting you on the tee, on the range, do some work. Yeah. You can't even get in the bloody golf.
Well, I had my backpack, and I didn't. Yeah, I had my backpack with all the things in it that I needed, and they're just telling me I can't bring my backpack in, and I'm like, no, I need my back. They had to bring their supervisor over, which took 10 minutes, and then they had to check everything and then approve it. Yeah. Oh gosh, it was brutal.
It would be a very interesting module in the PGA. Like, if you want to be a tour player, here's the things that you need to know.
Yeah, and I think 2 avenues you'd go with that is, one, just make people aware. I don't think nobody is an expert to come in and say, oh, this is what you should do at tour level, but we can make people aware of these are the differences. You have to time things differently. You might be working towards different goals, standing in a completely different place. You might only have a limited amount of time on the range. For example, if there's a pro-am coming on, the range is going to get swamped with a load of celebrity amateur golfers. You've only got 10, 15 minutes on the range. This is when you're at home, you could have 2-3 hours with them. Now as a coach, I've got 15 minutes today on the range. because the range is swamped by celebrity pro-ams. What are we going to do? I know, let's call a local driving range and go and use it. So now you're thinking outside the box in a way that you probably wouldn't even, like, say, if you weren't aware of this, the shit hits the fan, and you're like, okay, well, I guess we're not playing to golf today then because there's a celeb pro-am.
Yeah, I remember I did like an interleave practice circuit for a player, gave it to his coach, so it was like, he does a lot of TrackMan combines, so I wanted to add increased spacing and variability in the combine and show him that would bring his score down, make it less massed, less blocked. So he would hit the 60-yard, and then he would have to hole a putt, and then he would hit the 60-yard, and then he would have to hole a putt. And I did this, and honestly, it was early on and it took so long, and I was so proud of it, and I sent it over. Guy was like, well, that's not going to work. I'm like, why? He's like, the putting green's about 3 miles away from the driving range, and as soon as we leave the putting green, we're going to lose our hole. Like, we're never going to, it's going to be crazy, because this is great theoretically, and it was, right? I've still got the document. I'm super proud of it. Can do it at our own course in the nice and calm, but in the chaos of the tour, no chance was that ever going to be implemented. So
this putting green yesterday had 5 holes.
Yeah.
It might be one of the smallest putting greens I've ever been on.
Yeah.
Like, it was, I mean, I couldn't stand anywhere to like actually watch him putt.
It's really exciting speaking to you, Danny, because I think everything that you're doing, I thought that myself, Eric, and Matthew, I thought we'd picked up a nice niche to try and help people practice more effectively and reach the masses and really try and revolutionize the way golf's practiced. But I think what you're doing for coaches is, like, it's even further down the line. It's very innovative and it's very necessary. So where do you see it going? We'll have to wrap up the podcast soon, but let's close it out with what's your vision and how are you going to get there, and how can people reach out to you? What help do you need?
Yeah, I would say the literature is already there on how decisions might be formed and what the decisions might be, but I don't think there's enough literature, training, and awareness on the art of coaching, and that's what we're saying. So it's not just about how you form your decisions, what your decisions are on, which we didn't really speak too much about, but is it a biomechanical issue, and if it is, where is it? How do we relate that to the nature of the goal and nature of the relationship? But my area that I've delved into is looking at the tools coaches can use to help land their decisions. So it's more the art of coaching. And I think coach education, coach media, social media, publications are very proactive in pushing the science of coaching, but there's a lot less emphasis on the art of coaching, and I believe that's where coaches are going to move forward, is looking almost at the science of the art of coaching.
Yeah, so the evidence-led art almost, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I get it. That's awesome. Where can people reach out to you, connect with you if they like what you hear?
I would, Instagram, website, so Instagram at Danny Adams Golf. Jump on the website, dannyadamsgolf.com. Drop us a message if there's anything there that people think is quite interested. And even from a playing perspective, these classical and naturalistic decisions are relevant to players as well. So if there was a player out there who said, well, how can this help me as a player tactically, course management wise, drop us a message and we can have a little talk through it.
Perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a little chat in the future about any more projects that we can collaborate on. I think there's a couple of people that I know that would love to touch base with you. And also, hopefully we can host a taster of your work on our website to complement the podcast and also potentially create a couple of blogs. We're gonna definitely support your mission and get your awesome work out there. Thanks so much for being on the show, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Awesome, cool. Ian, excited to get this podcast out there. Danny, thanks again for your time. I know I took a lot away from that podcast, and coaches, I know you definitely will as well. Probably going to be something you're going to want to listen to a couple times. I would suggest having a pen and a notepad ready. you're going to definitely need it. So to stay up to date, make sure you go to our website, gltgolf.com. You can subscribe to our mailing list. We have a weekly mail out that'll keep you up to date with all of our podcasts that are coming out, as well as the education and blog of the week. So make sure you do that. We are on SoundCloud. We are also on iTunes Podcast or Apple Podcast, whatever it's called. So make sure you check us out there. We're on Instagram, Game L Training. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Game Like Training Golf. And we're also on YouTube. So Game Like Training, check us out on there. You can watch the podcast if you are not watching it currently. Cool. Looking forward to getting this out. Thanks,
Awesome.
Danny.
Thanks, Danny.